Welcome Sagittarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for May. Now last month, with the gathering of energy in Pisces, but particularly Saturn, the more emotional family or home-based dimension of your situation may have called out for your attention, whether you wanted it to or not. But the change point was the 18th, because then Mars moved into your 9th house. Now the 9th house has a redolence with the energy of your sign. It can be very much to do with independence, freedom, adventure, but particularly when Mars is in the mix, because Mars is very much about being a little more assertive, perhaps even risk-taking. But Mars did go face to face with Pluto in your 3rd house, everyday communication. The 9th house can be the big picture, and sometimes things like contracts, the law, and philosophies. So you may have found yourself going for that rather tender, protective space with all those energies in the 4th house of your situation, to suddenly wanting to break out. You may even have been much more outspoken, which brings us to the start of this month, because the gathering of energy in your 5th house, which is augmented on the 1st of this month by the lovely Venus, includes Mercury, but also for the first time, in terms of Venus's connection, Neptune in Aries. So they're aligning together in your fellow fire sign for the first time in our collective lifetimes. And through the first week of this month, they can see you feeling much more outgoing, particularly as Mars and Pluto are still sparring. But through that sparring, it can also create a spark, a thrust, because ideas, knowledge are always areas that excite you, and because the 5th house can also be fun and sociability, and having Mercury there can be a little bit playful, perhaps even mischievous. Your sense of humour can also spark up as we start this month. And also Venus then goes on to forge a very strong alliance with Pluto, the planet of transformation, but thereafter it starts to build into an epic alliance with Mars. So as much as Mars and Pluto in that direct opposition may have created some quite intense discussions, maybe even some disagreements, or may have seen you very earnest about asserting your ideas, once Mars starts to move beyond the position of Pluto, but Venus continues to align with Mars, reaching the peak on the 22nd, you could find that something much more playful, much more outgoing, much more dynamic and exciting than was possible, particularly in the first half of April, when Mercury and Venus were still in retrogrades and also being clamped and escorted very closely, in the case of Venus, by the stern Saturn. You're going to feel a much greater sense of freedom. But that doesn't mean to say that some of your responsibilities and obligations aren't still going to be calling out to you. And that in itself could create a little bit of a conflict. But by the 4th, Pluto does go retrograde, and will be so for the following 5 months, an annual event. Inverts around about 2.5 degrees through to the 14th of October, but it's still in the 3rd house, which can be to do with your physical movements, it can be to do with how you think, your belief systems. Pluto can be the revealer, but of course it can be about evolution. So you could find yourself wanting to move around more, maybe even do something a little bit more active at the start of this month, but the more binding energy of the Sun in Taurus at the start of this month suggests that whatever you're doing creatively or fun-wise, if you can find a way to make it work in a more practical dimension, that's good too. The 5th, however, sees Venus leave its shadow. The retrograde ended on the 13th of April in Pisces. Because it returns to Aries at the start of this month, for you that's very glamorous, the 5th house. And even though Venus is technically debilitated in Aries, don't worry about that. For you, it's going to flame you up. Whatever excites or interests you comes to life. So Venus coming out of shadow helps along that process. But on the 10th, Mercury joins the Sun in Taurus, the 6th house. It's all about the details. And it's really important over the next few days as Mercury T-squares both Mars in the escapist 9th house and the 3rd house of Pluto, that you don't rush things. I feel that there can be a part of most Sagittarians that, although you have a fantastic appetite for information, if the information is more mundane, it can be a little dull. So, you know, whatever you might not really want to engage with, the small print, if you like, of something on an everyday practical basis, just be conscious that something could be missed that's important, because you'd rather be talking about or doing something that's much more exciting and critically dramatic. So some practical strands are emphasized even more by the full moon in the tender 12th house for you on the 12th. Scorpio is not where the moon's at its best. If there are any fears or anxieties, or if there is any politics just simmering beneath the surface, particularly professionally, they could explode into the open over the next week or so. And just be aware that Mercury also is going to move and connect with Uranus too. Uranus has been quite a challenging influence, I feel, at times since 2019, the March, because the 6th house is where we do need to be aligned, we do need to have a structure, we do need to be metronomic, and Uranus doesn't like any of those things because it's so free-spirited. So if you have found routines or work or jobs rather dull and changed them several times, not really a surprise. But here on this event, it's essentially saying to us that the physical domain, the 6th house, which is to do with our health, energy, vitality, diet, exercise, routines, is confronted by the moon in a very psychological area, which can be about the parts of life we don't want to look at, our vulnerabilities, our shadow side. And especially at work, if you do rush something, someone could seize on a small error and inflate it and exaggerate it in a way which could really frustrate you. So just prepare yourself for that phase of the month by really concentrating, even if it isn't really something that particularly engages or excites you. However, the 20th sees the Sun move into your 7th house, where your ruler has been since the end of May last year. And the Sun moving into Gemini is an opportunity to clarify if there has been any tensions or mixed wires at the heart of the month. On the 25th, Saturn moves into your 5th house for the first time since 1999. It does link with Neptune immediately, but forges a great sextile to Pluto, and that combination can be very good. If you are a creative, or you are artistic, or you have great imagination, or you've a story to tell, or there's fun you want to have, what Pluto and Saturn are saying in their collaboration, which can be cooperative, they're saying, look, it is important to have a clear plan, do the research and execute it in a disciplined way. And Saturn in the 5th house could therefore in the next 3 months give you an opportunity to get something that's important to you, get some kind of foundation point established which you can grow from next year when Saturn returns in the early part of 26 for the longer term. But the 5th house can of course be a romance, and it can be about play, and it can be about children, and Saturn can be of course quite limiting. So if there is something that isn't really quite as structured as it could be, Saturn's urging you to give it some handrails, because if you have those handrails, it can be more sustained. But if you have been seeing someone and it hasn't been much fun recently, especially with the clash between Venus and Saturn all through April, so Saturn in your 4th house, making you much more conscious of your feelings, Venus about relationships, I feel that Saturn moving into your 5th house and the Sun in your 7th, linking back to Saturn, but also Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, joining your 7th house on the 26th, then the new moon of the 27th, then the Mercury cazimi at the 30th. All of that's asking you to gain clarity, illumination, and wanting to have very clean connections to others. So where the air, Gemini, is flowing freely and there's good listening skills either side, there could be a very exciting collaboration which starts to shape up towards the end of this month. But it needs to be one that doesn't have the dramas and heaviness and disappointments and limitations that maybe have been more prevalent over the last couple of years because of Saturn being in your 4th house. So if you feel safe and secure with someone, but you can still be playful and have fun, you know that you've got the right mix. If you are feeling that it's burdensome and you're not really enjoying it, there's not much sense of pleasure, the 5th house, Saturn's giving you an early alert of something that does need to be addressed. And because Uranus is going to move into your sector of relating on the 7th of July through to the 7th of October, if something isn't working for you around a relationship, that could be a time, particularly with Saturn just in those first couple of degrees of Aries, that you may decide to finally call time, however hard you've tried. But what that 7th house energy does provide you at the end of this month is huge opportunities to get a better flow of information backwards and forwards. So even if there have been some challenges at the heart of the month, especially professionally at work, you can resolve them with patience and a desire and willingness to find points of communication, collaboration, but critically also cooperation. Have a great month, Sagittarius. Take care and goodbye. Remember to check out my new website, please, at www.patrickarundell.com. You can get your free natal horoscope. It's absolutely brilliant. The big three, the ascendant, sun and the moon, but also you can find out exactly where your other planets are, the signs they're in, the houses they're in, and critically the relationships between them. You can also sign up for your free daily written horoscope. Please see below for more.